On the morning of June 11, 2011, a wildlife officer responded to a call on Route 15 in Milford, Connecticut. A large cat lay dead on the highway shoulder, struck by a vehicle overnight. The animal was male, between 2 and 3 years old, and weighed approximately 140 pounds. Wildlife officials initially suspected an escaped captive. DNA analysis returned a different result. The animal was Puma concolor the cougar, known across its range as the mountain lion, the puma, the catamount, the panther, a single species distributed from Patagonia to the Yukon and the most broadly ranging large terrestrial mammal in the Western Hemisphere. The subspecies designated Puma concolor cougar, the eastern cougar, once occupied every major forested watershed east of the Mississippi, from the Canadian maritime provinces to the Gulf of Mexico. Hunting reduced its range. Agricultural clearing compressed it further. The near-total extirpation of white-tailed deer from large portions of the eastern United States in the late 19th century removed the prey base on which the subspecies depended. State by state, the records closed. The last confirmed wild specimen in the northeastern United States was killed in Maine in 1938. The last confirmed individual anywhere in the eastern range excluding the Florida panther, which the USFUVS designates as a separate subspecies, had been documented decades before that. In 2011, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service completed a formal status review and declared the eastern cougar extinct. In 2018, the subspecies was formally removed from the federal Endangered Species List. These are the accepted facts. The genetic profile recovered from the Connecticut animal matched none of the captive cougar populations on record. It matched the wild mountain lion population of the Black Hills of South Dakota. The animal had traveled approximately 1,500 miles through Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan before entering New York State and continuing east, not documented through any credible sighting along its route, but inferred from the genetics of the final specimen and the geography between its origin and its death. The question is not whether one animal completed that journey. The question is whether the journey has been made before, and whether every animal that made it was as visible as the one that died. The Appalachian mountain chain extends approximately 2,400 kilometers from northern Alabama to the Gaspe Peninsula in Quebec, a continuous corridor of forested ridgelines, hollow systems, and steep-walled drainages that has never been comprehensively surveyed for large predators. The combined area of federally managed land in the broader Appalachian region national parks, national forests, wilderness designations is measured in the tens of millions of acres, supplemented by state forests, private timber holdings, and river corridors that connect the system north to south into an unbroken travel network. The eastern forest has recovered substantially over the past century. Agricultural abandonment and reforestation have returned canopy cover to large portions of states where it had been absent for generations. White-tailed deer now number in the tens of millions across the eastern United States, with densities in the Appalachian highlands high enough that localized overabundance has become a documented management concern in the absence of functional apex predators. The Appalachian terrain does not simply shelter large animals, it consumes them. Camera trap grids in the most systematically studied sections of this landscape have been deployed across areas measured in the thousands of hectares within wilderness blocks, whose total acreage is measured in the millions. The Adirondack Park in northern New York encompasses approximately 2.6 million acres, of which roughly 1 million constitute designated wilderness. National forest land in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia combined exceeds 3 million acres, concentrated in terrain whose interior sections approach zero road density. A research effort deploying camera coverage at the scale typical of published eastern wildlife surveys illuminates a fraction of 1% of the available habitat. An absence of detection recorded against this kind of sampling is not a finding about the landscape. It is a record of what the cameras were aimed at. Research led by LaRue and colleagues documenting verified cougar presence east of the Rocky Mountains physical specimens. DNA confirmed roadkill, unambiguous trail camera photographs found that confirmed incidents had accumulated steadily across more than a dozen states over 2 decades of observation. The distribution was not random. It traced river corridors and forested ridgeline systems that parallel the structural connectivity of the eastern forest network, the same geographic logic that would govern movement for any large predator navigating a fragmented landscape. The absence of detection across the broader terrain reflected the distribution of survey effort rather than the distribution of the animals. Puma concolor is crepuscular in undisturbed habitat and largely nocturnal in terrain where human activity concentrates. It is solitary by ecological design. Adult males maintain territories of 150 to 500 square kilometers, with females occupying smaller ranges that overlap minimally with the movement corridors of dispersing males. Population densities, even in prime western habitat, typically fall below 1 individual per 100 square kilometers. The species selects for dense cover, riparian drainages, talus slopes, the steep-walled hollow systems and laurel thickets that characterize mature southern Appalachian forest. In radiocollar studies of western populations, individual animals have remained undetected by camera trap grids within their documented territories for periods of weeks. An animal shaped by a century of intensive persecution to remain nocturnal, solitary, and invisible in precisely this kind of terrain has not developed a detectability problem. It has developed, under sustained selection pressure, a behavioral architecture that treats non-detection as a survival output. If a remnant population occupies the eastern forest, its behavioral signature would be indistinguishable from the signature of absence. The Cougar network, which maintains one of the most comprehensive databases of verified mountain lion incidents east of the Rocky Mountains, has documented confirmed physical evidence of mountain lion presence in Missouri, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and additional states over the past 2 decades. Not observer reports. Physical specimens with recovered tissue, photographic records permitting morphological identification, and genomic analysis cross-referenced to source populations. Accounts submitted by park rangers, state wildlife biologists, and game wardens operating in Appalachian terrain have in several cases failed to receive formal confirmation from state wildlife agencies, not because the observers lacked qualification, but because no physical evidence was recoverable. Each account, assessed in isolation, describes a single professional observer in appropriate habitat reporting a single event. Assessed across observer type, geographic distribution, and 2 decades of accumulation, they describe a pattern that the misidentification rates documented for untrained observers cannot adequately explain. The science here supports 2 positions simultaneously. Each confirmed individual incident is consistent with dispersal from established Western populations, and the aggregate spatial pattern of those incidents, viewed across geography and time, is consistent with directional movement toward terrain that has not been adequately surveyed to determine whether reproduction has occurred within it. Not enough to confirm, not enough to dismiss. If you've made it this far, subscribe. This channel covers the cases science hasn't closed. The counterargument is genuine and demands precision. Every DINA-confirmed specimen recovered in the eastern United States has been identified as genetically Western from the Black Hills and adjacent source populations, not from any distinct eastern lineage. No confirmed breeding female has been documented east of the established Western range. No confirmed kitten, den site, or reproductive pair. Without confirmed reproduction, what the data describes is dispersal biologically significant behavior with no population-level implication in the absence of confirmed establishment. The USFW's position that the documented incidents represent individual dispersal events rather than recolonization in progress is scientifically defensible. It rests on the absence of confirmed reproduction. Taxonomic context sharpens the problem. Modern genomic analysis has questioned the validity of the eastern cougar as a distinct subspecies. Research has suggested that North American cougar subspecies designations are not well supported by genetic data, and that puma concolor cougar may represent a regional population of the broader species rather than a genetically distinct lineage. If that argument is correct, then the extirpation of the eastern population and the current westward to eastward dispersal are not two separate biological events. They are one process, interrupted by a century of human pressure, and now, possibly, resuming. But the question is not whether that framing is correct. The question is whether the methodology applied to the eastern landscape is capable of detecting a reproductively active female and animals smaller than the males that have been confirmed, with a smaller home range, less movement, and a behavioral tendency toward the densest and least accessible terrain in the study area. The males that have been confirmed were confirmed because they moved across roads, through human-occupied landscapes, until one of them moved into a highway. The reproductive female, if she exists, does not move like that. The methodology that detected the male was designed for the animal that travels. There is no equivalent methodology for the animal that stays. The answer to whether this pattern has historical precedent is not theoretical. History has already demonstrated what recovering eastern forests can preserve without our knowledge. The black-footed ferret, Mustela nigripes, was declared extinct by the IUCN in 1979. In September 1981, a ranch dog near Meteets, Wyoming, killed an animal that was brought to wildlife biologists and identified as a black-footed ferret, revealing a colony of approximately 100 to 130 individuals that had persisted for at least 2 years after declared extinction within 200 kilometers of active agricultural operations, without triggering any formal detection. The surveys that produced the 1979 finding had not failed methodologically. They had been applied at a Resolution 2 course to detect what remained. The gray wolf's return to California follows a parallel structure. Wolves had been absent from California since approximately the 1920s, when, in late 2011, a single dispersing male designated or 7 crossed from Oregon, the first confirmed wolf in the state in nearly 90 years. Every California specimen confirmed over the following 4 years was a lone male. A breeding pack was documented in Siskiyou County in 2015. 4 years of confirmed dispersal, no confirmed female, no confirmed reproduction followed by confirmed reproduction. The interval during which the absence of a confirmed breeding female was a technically accurate argument against recolonization was also the interval during which recolonization was underway. The Black Hills cougar population that produced the Connecticut animal is itself a recolonization case. Mountain lions were extirpated from South Dakota by the early 20th century. The population that now serves as the documented source for eastern dispersers re-established through natural movement over subsequent decades, with confirmed breeding recorded from the 1970s onward. The animal found dead in Connecticut descended from a lineage that had itself been absent, then present, then systematically undetected, then confirmed. Route 15 in Milford, Connecticut, 4 lanes, bordered by secondary forest and residential subdivision. 40 miles from the coast holds the investigation's clearest data point, a dead male cougar with South Dakota genetics, alone, 1,500 miles from the nearest documented conspecific. The landscape closed over the route it had traveled like water closing over a stone. No record, no witnesses, no recoverable trace at any point along 1,500 miles of eastern forest and farmland and river corridor until the animal itself became the evidence. The eastern forest does not reveal what it has decided to keep. Whether what the eastern forest currently yields to survey effort a pattern of confirmed lone males, a consistent absence of confirmed breeding females, no confirmed reproduction across decades of accumulating incidents, constitutes evidence of what the forest contains, or evidence of the boundaries of what current surveys can see, is the question the available data has not answered, and may